This morning, we read a Haftarah that is almost never read. As I mentioned, we only read this morning's Haftarah when the Shabbat during which we read Parshat Miketz, as we did this morning, does not fall during Hanukkah, and that's extremely rare. We almost always read Miketz on Hanukkah. As I mentioned, the next time that Miketz will be read after Hanukkah is in the year 2040, 17 years from now. So if I want to talk about this morning's Haftarah, now's the chance. And although we almost never read it, this morning's Haftarah recounts one of the most famous stories in the entire Hebrew Bible. It's the classic story of King Solomon's wisdom. Two women come before Solomon arguing over a baby. Each woman claims to be the mother of the child, so Solomon offers a solution. The baby should be cut in half, and each woman will get half the child. And one of the women says, "Great, that sounds like a reasonable solution." But the other woman says, "No, don't kill the baby. I want my child to live. Please, give my baby to the other woman." To which Solomon says, "You are the real mother." And that story is often referred to as the tale of the two mothers, but most people don't remember who the mothers were. So I'll remind you, they were prostitutes. They were members of the Jewish people who lived on the fringe, on the outskirts of society. In other words, they weren't the kinds of women whom you would expect would be welcome in a king's throne room. And yet, Solomon does welcome them. He gives them time, he listens to them, he adjudicates their disputes. And the fact that Solomon welcomed these two women into his throne room is a reflection of the kind of leader that King Solomon was. Everyone, regardless of class or socioeconomic status, everyone was welcome in King Solomon's court. Everyone was valued. Everyone was cared for. As Solomon teaches us through his actions, a great leader recognizes the intrinsic value in every single human being. Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik once wrote that the king resides in the midst of the people. He is always close and accessible to his subjects. Everyone may approach the king. Widow, orphan, woodchopper, water drawer, vagabond, stranger, sinner, or thief. Each may complain, each may demand justice, each may ask for help. The king opens himself to everyone and embraces the entire nation without excluding a single person. In other words, in our tradition, the king is king to all of his subjects, regardless of who they may be. Every single person is entitled to equal treatment by the king. Maimonides, the great 12th century scholar, takes it even a step further. As he put it, Melech libo lev lechol adam. A king's heart is the heart of all the people. According to Maimonides, being a Jewish king requires empathy. It's not only about serving your subjects, it's actually about feeling what your subjects feel. Their pain, their suffering, their hardships. That is what defines kingship and ultimately what defines true moral leadership. And what we all saw in the congressional testimony of the three presidents of Harvard, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania last week was an abject failure in moral leadership. On December 5th, the presidents of three of the most prestigious universities in the world gave testimony about how they are handling the recent explosion of anti-Semitism on their campuses. And in what has become the most infamous segment of that hearing, all three presidents were asked what should have been a very simple question to answer: does calling for the genocide of Jews violate their school's code of conduct regarding bullying or harassment? And not a single president, not the president of Harvard, not the president of MIT, not the president of Penn, was able to answer that question with a simple yes. Liz McGill of Penn gave the most damning answer, an answer which led to her resignation just a few days later. When asked if calling for the genocide of Jews constitutes bullying or harassment at Penn, she smirked and she said it's a context-dependent decision. And that is the comment that resulted in President McGill losing her job. As many people have pointed out since last Tuesday, what is so deeply problematic about what those presidents said is that for years, all three of those institutions had taken a very strong stance on hate speech. Harvard told students in a mandatory Title IX training session just last year that any words used to lower a person's self-worth are verbal abuse, and such verbal abuse would not be tolerated on Harvard's campus. And it shouldn't be tolerated. If white students held a rally calling for violence against black people, or if straight students organized a protest calling for the genocide of LGBTQ individuals, it is unimaginable that any of those schools would allow that to happen. There is no question that those kinds of rallies would constitute a violation of the code of conduct at Harvard, at MIT, at Penn, and hopefully at any other school. But when students call for the genocide of Jews, suddenly labeling it as bullying or harassment is a context-dependent decision. The hypocrisy and the double standard is maddening. Are Jews any less worthy of protection than any other students on campus? As Shylock said in The Merchant of Venice, I'm a Jew. Has not a Jew eyes? Has not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? As many have also pointed out, the presidents gave legal answers to what were really moral questions. And let's be very clear. The job of a university president is not to point out what may or may not be legally permissible. The job of a university president is to embody leadership, and not just intellectual leadership, but moral leadership. It's hard to believe in light of what was said last week, but the motto of the University of Pennsylvania is laws without morals are useless. Laws without morals are useless. During her testimony last week, President Liz McGill forgot that motto in the most egregious way possible. She forgot what her university, the university that she was supposed to lead, stood for. And what all three presidents forgot is what King Solomon stood for. In Solomon's kingdom, every single subject was valued. Every subject was protected. Widows, orphans, woodchoppers, vagabonds, thieves. It didn't matter who you were. It was the king's job to see you, to hear you, and to make you understand that your life had value. And that is precisely what those three presidents failed to do. Because right now, every student on their campus does not feel protected. Their Jewish students don't feel protected. I've said this before, and you all know it. Since October 7th, anti-Semitism has risen 700% on college campuses. According to the ADL, over the past 2 months, 73% of Jewish college students have experienced or witnessed some form of anti-Semitism, and only 38% of students now feel extremely safe with others knowing they are Jewish. It's past time for university presidents to start thinking about protecting not only their black students or their LGBTQ students, but their Jewish students as well. To paraphrase Maimonides, a president's heart is the heart of all her students. Being a university president requires empathy. It's not only about meeting your students' needs, it's about feeling what your students are feeling, what all of your students are feeling. Because, as King Solomon reminds us, that is what moral leadership means. Shabbat Shalom. We rise for Chatzi Kaddish, page